"I'm so excited to see my only daughter in her wedding dress," I told my grandson. He just smiled cruelly. "Grandma, you've lost your mind." Her wedding was yesterday, and she decided to only invite the people who were important to her. The next day, I showed up at her door with a notary public and a surprise. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has traveled. I had been on this earth for 62 years, and I never thought my own grandson would stab me so deeply in the heart." Vincent was sitting in my living room, wearing that smile that used to melt my soul, but now seemed to hold something sinister. He had come to visit, just like he did every Sunday, and I was excitedly telling him about the dress I'd bought for the big day. "I'm so anxious to see my only daughter in her wedding dress," I said, pulling the navy blue dress from the closet. I had chosen it so carefully, thinking about every little detail. Claire had always been picky about clothes, and I wanted to look perfect for her special day. Vincent looked at me with those green eyes he'd inherited from his grandfather, my late husband. For a moment, I saw something strange in his expression, as if he were fighting an internal battle. Then, that cruel smile spread across his 17-year-old face. "Grandma, have you lost your mind?" The words shot out of his mouth like bullets. Mom's wedding was yesterday. She decided to only invite the people who are important to her. The dress slipped from my hands. The world stopped. I felt as if someone had emptied all the air from my lungs, and the floor beneath me had turned to quicksand. "What did you say?" My voice was a hoarse whisper. Vincent leaned back on the sofa, clearly enjoying my shock. "Yeah, Grandma, it was a beautiful ceremony, very elegant, very exclusive. Only the people who really matter." He paused dramatically. "Too bad you weren't on that list." Tears started to well up, but there was something else growing in my chest besides sadness. It was a rage I hadn't felt in decades. How was it possible that my own daughter, the little girl I had raised by myself after her father died when she was 15, had shut me out of the most important day of her life? "You can't be serious, Vincent." My voice trembled. "Claire would never do something like that. There must be some misunderstanding." Vincent let out a laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Misunderstanding? Grandma, Mom has been planning this for months. She even sent out super fancy invitations, paper with gold embossing and everything. Obviously, your name wasn't on any of them." I sat down heavily in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed Claire so many years ago. How had it come to this? When had my relationship with my daughter deteriorated so much that she could get married without even telling me? But I spoke to her last week. She told me she was busy with the final preparations. The words came out in ragged breaths. I thought she would call me with the details. "Oh, she was super busy," Vincent continued with a teenage cruelty that now seemed calculated, not casual. "The venue was incredible. A ballroom downtown with a view of the river. It must have cost a fortune. And the dress. Oh my God, Grandma. It was like a princess gown. It must have cost more than $5,000. Every detail was another stab. My daughter had spent more on a dress than I made in 3 months from my pension, and I didn't even know she'd gotten married." "How many people were there?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "About 150, I think. All very elegant people. The new husband's family has a lot of money, you know. Mom says she's finally going to be able to live the life she always deserved." The life she always deserved. As if the life we had built together after her father's death had been worthless. As if all those years of me working double shifts to pay for her college education had meant nothing to her. "Vincent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "why are you telling me this way? Why didn't you tell me before the wedding?" His expression shifted slightly. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something like guilt, but it vanished quickly. "Mom told me not to say anything. She said you'd get all dramatic and ruin everything." He shrugged as if he were talking about the weather. "I guess she thought it was better this way." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but at the same time, something dark and determined began to form in my mind. Claire had made a decision. She had decided I wasn't important enough to be in her new life. Fine, I could make decisions too. I stood up from the armchair with a calmness that surprised me. "Vincent, I think it's time for you to go." "Grandma?" For the first time since he arrived, he seemed genuinely confused. I said, "Go, now." After Vincent left, I was alone in my house, surrounded by photos of Claire at every stage of her life. Pictures from her graduation, her birthdays, our vacations together. In every single one, I was there, smiling, supporting her, loving her unconditionally. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake all night, and for the first time in years, it wasn't out of worry or sadness. It was something much more powerful: determination. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I was standing at the front door of Claire's house. It wasn't the same modest house she'd lived in before. This was a mansion in Beacon Hill, with perfectly manicured gardens and an entrance that screamed money. Apparently, her new husband had even more resources than Vincent had let on. I rang the doorbell once, then again. Finally, the door opened, and there was my daughter. She was wearing a cream-colored silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. When she saw me, her expression showed neither surprise nor guilt, just a slight irritation, as if I were an annoying salesperson. "Mom, what are you doing here so early?" "So early?" I repeated, feeling the rage from the previous night rush back. "Is that your first question after getting married yesterday without saying a word to me?" Claire sighed dramatically, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Come in, but I have a lunch appointment, so you can't stay long." I stepped into the house and immediately felt like an intruder. Everything was white, gold, and perfect. Nothing personal, nothing that reminded me of the Claire I had raised. It was like walking into the showroom of a home decor magazine. "Nice house," I said, looking around. "Very different." "Thanks. Michael has great taste." She settled onto a sofa that probably cost more than my car. "So, Mom, what did you want to talk about?" The coldness in her voice hit me like a slap. This wasn't my daughter, or maybe it was, and I had been blind all these years. "What do I want to talk about?" My voice went up an octave. "Claire, I missed your wedding. Your wedding. Do you have any idea what that means to me?" She examined her nails, which were perfectly manicured in a pale pink. "Look, Mom, I understand you're upset, but you need to understand that this was a very deliberate decision." "Deliberate?" "Yes." She finally looked at me directly. "Michael comes from a very prestigious family. His father is a partner at one of the biggest law firms in Boston. His mother is on the board of 3 different charities. These are people who move in very specific circles. And you don't fit into those circles, Mom." She said it as casually as she would have commented on the weather. "Your job at the factory, your house in that neighborhood, the way you are. Michael and his family have certain expectations about the kind of people they associate with." I felt like I'd been slapped. "The way I am? No offense, but you're a little dramatic. And your clothes? The way you talk. It's not that it's wrong. It's just not appropriate for the kind of events I'll be attending now." "Dramatic?" The word came out like a hiss. "Claire, I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 60 hours a week to pay for your college. I stayed up with you every night when you had nightmares. And now I'm too dramatic to be at your wedding? Mom, please, don't make a scene. She stood up and walked to the window. Look, I get that you're hurt, but you need to see the bigger picture. This marriage opens doors for me that I never thought I'd have. Michael can give me the life I always wanted. And what about the life we built together? Did that mean nothing? She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that chilled my blood. It wasn't sadness or regret. It was impatience, as if I were an obstacle she needed to remove. Mom, that life was what we had to do because of our circumstances. But now I have options, and one of those options is to surround myself only with people who add value to my new social standing. Value? The word came out as a choked cry. Yes, value. What can you bring to my marriage, Mom? To my new life? Let's be honest. You worked in a factory for 30 years. You live in a house that's practically falling apart, and your idea of a fancy restaurant is Olive Garden. Every word was like a dagger, but what hurt most was how easily she said them. There was no internal struggle, no conflict. She had made these decisions about me, about our bond, with the coldness of someone calculating their monthly expenses. So, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, is this a permanent break? Am I not your mother anymore? Don't be so dramatic, Mom. We're still family. It's just, I need you to understand that things are going to be different now. Very different. Different how? Well, for instance, we probably won't see each other as often, and when we do, it will have to be in more appropriate places. No more just showing up here unannounced, obviously, and definitely no appearances at social events. Appearances? I felt like I was talking to a stranger. Claire, I'm your mother, and I'm Michael Thornton's wife now. That comes with responsibilities and expectations you can't understand. You're right, I said, rising slowly. I can't understand how the daughter I raised turned into this. Into a successful woman who knows what she wants. Her voice held a defiant tone. Into someone who can discard the people who loved her when they're no longer useful. For the first time in the entire conversation, I saw a flicker of something like discomfort in her eyes, but it lasted only a second. If that's how you want to see it, that's your choice, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting a better life. A better life? I headed for the door. Claire, you just destroyed the most important relationship in your life for money and status. Do you really think that's a better life? Yes, she answered without hesitation. I definitely do. I left that house with a broken heart, but also with something I hadn't had in a long time. Absolute clarity. My daughter had made her choice. She had weighed the unconditional love I'd given her entire life against the social and economic advantages of her new marriage, and she had chosen the latter. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had looked up online early that morning. Harrison and Associates Law Office. How can I help you? I need to speak with a notary public. It's urgent. It was time for Claire to learn that choices have consequences. 3 days after the most painful confrontation of my life, I was once again standing at Claire's front door. This time, I wasn't alone. Mr. Harrison, a 60-year-old notary public with gray hair and a serious expression, was with me. He carried a black leather briefcase containing documents that would change everything. Claire opened the door with the same irritated look she'd worn before, but when she saw the suited man beside me, her brow furrowed in curiosity. Mom, what is this? Her voice had a cautious tone that hadn't been there at our last meeting. May we come in? We have important business to discuss. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw a flash of uncertainty in my daughter's eyes. She let us in, but remained standing near the door as if ready to throw us out at any moment. "Claire," I began with a calm I had practiced for 3 days, "I'd like you to meet Mr. Harrison. He's a notary public, and he's here to witness some important changes I need to make." "Changes?" There was a note of alarm in her voice now. "What kind of changes?" Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase and took out several documents. "Ma'am, your mother has retained me to witness and notarize alterations to her last will and testament, as well as changes to the ownership of several significant assets." I watched the color drain from Claire's face. Her eyes darted between the notary and me, as if trying to process what she was hearing. "Mom, what is he talking about?" "Sit down, Claire." My voice was firm, but not cruel. "It's time you learned exactly what it means to discard your family." She slowly sat on the white sofa, her hands trembling slightly. It was the first time I'd seen her show any kind of vulnerability since this whole situation started. "For 35 years, I began, "I have been saving every penny I could to make sure you had a secure future. The house you grew up in, where your father and I planned to grow old together, was always meant to be yours." "Mom, I'm not finished." I held up a hand. "That house is worth $250,000 now. It's not a mansion like this one, but it's a home filled with memories of a family that loved you unconditionally." Mr. Harrison placed the first document on the glass coffee table. "This is the new last will and testament of Mrs. Grace Miller. As you can see, the family home will no longer be inherited by Ms. Claire Miller." "What?" Claire leaned forward, quickly scanning the lines of the document. "Who are you leaving it to?" "The Boston Foundation for Single Mothers," I answered. "Families who actually need a home, not people who consider modest houses to be practically falling apart." Claire turned even paler. "Mom, those were just words. I was upset. I didn't mean it." "Oh, you didn't?" I took out my phone and played a recording. Her voice, crystal clear. "What can you bring to my marriage, Mom? To my new life? You worked in a factory for 30 years. You live in a house that's practically falling apart. You recorded me?" Her voice jumped an octave. "Yes, every cruel word you said." I put the phone away. I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining how my own daughter had discarded me like trash. Tears began to form in Claire's eyes, but they no longer affected me as they once did. For 3 days, I had cried all the tears I had. Now, all that remained was a cold, clear resolve. Mr. Harrison placed another document on the table. "This one is particularly interesting. Did you know, ma'am, that your mother also had a life insurance policy for $500,000 with you as the beneficiary?" "Had?" Claire stared at the document with growing horror. "The beneficiary is now Vincent," I said simply. "At least he had the decency to tell me the truth about your wedding, however cruel he was. Vincent is just a kid. Vincent is your son, and unlike you, he hasn't spent years plotting how to get rid of me when I'm no longer useful." Claire shot up from the sofa. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a silly fight." "A silly fight?" My voice remained dangerously calm. "Claire, you uninvited me from your wedding. Not a spur-of-the-moment fight, but a calculated decision you made months ago. You told me plainly that I add no value to your new life." "Well, I can do a little calculating myself." "What do you mean?" Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "There are more documents, ma'am." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "Did you know your father had a brother, Claire? Your Uncle Robert, who passed away 5 years ago with no children?" "Vaguely," she answered, confused. "He left everything to me. His house in Florida, his investments, his retirement account. In total, almost $700,000. I saw her eyes widen in shock. For the past few years, I've been managing that money, saving it to give to you when you were ready to buy your first house. Mom, her voice was barely a whisper. That money is also going to Vincent now, along with my own retirement fund. Claire swayed slightly. How much? How much money is it in total? $1,200,000, Mr. Harrison answered, reading from the document. It will be placed in a trust for Vincent, managed by Mrs. Miller, until he turns 25. $1.2 million, Claire shrieked. Mom, that's a fortune. You can't give all of that to Vincent. Why not? I asked. According to you, I have no value to add to your life. Clearly the money I've been saving for you has no value either. That's not what I meant. Oh, isn't it? Because you said very clearly that you needed to surround yourself only with people who add value to your new social position. Well, now you have what you wanted. You're surrounded only by people you consider valuable. Claire began to pace back and forth, her hands shaking. Mom, please, think about this. You're making permanent decisions based on a moment of anger. A moment of anger? I rose slowly. Claire, you planned to exclude me from your wedding for months. You told Vincent not to say anything. You hired 150 people to celebrate the most important day of your life, and you deliberately left me out. That wasn't a moment of anger. That was a statement about the value I hold in your life. You can change your mind, she said desperately. Wills can be changed. Yes, I nodded. They can be, but I'm not going to. Mr. Harrison began putting the documents back in his briefcase. If there are no further questions, ma'am, we're finished here. Claire looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, pure panic. Mom, please, I know I made a mistake, but I'm still your daughter. No, I said, walking toward the door. A daughter doesn't do what you did to me. A daughter doesn't coldly calculate her mother's social worth and decide she's not worth keeping around. But I need you. I stopped in the doorway and turned to look at her one last time. You need me? Oh, you need my money. She didn't answer, and that was all the answer I needed. A week after the will was revealed, my phone was ringing off the hook. Claire had called 73 times in 5 days. She had left voicemails ranging from desperate pleas to thinly veiled threats. But there was something else I was about to discover. Something that would make everything I had done so far seem like just the first step in a much larger plan. Vincent came to visit me that Wednesday afternoon. He looked different, more nervous, like he was carrying a weight he didn't know how to handle. He sat on the same sofa where he had broken my heart a week ago, but this time his eyes avoided mine. Grandma, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I need to tell you something important. What is it, Vincent? It's about Mom and about Grandpa. He was referring to my late husband, Edward. There's something Mom never told you. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of thing? Vincent took a deep breath. Remember when Grandpa died? How Mom took care of all the insurance papers and the inheritance? Yes, of course. I was too heartbroken to handle all that. She insisted on helping. Well, Vincent shifted uncomfortably. There was more money than you knew. What do you mean? Grandpa had a separate investment account, one he'd been building for years without telling you, because he wanted it to be a surprise for when you retired together. My heart began to pound faster. Vincent, what are you talking about? Mom found the paperwork when she was going through everything. The account had $400,000 in it, Grandma. Grandpa had been funding it with money from his side jobs, the late nights at the warehouse. The world started spinning around me. $400,000? Mom never told you. She took the money and used it for the down payment on her first house, to pay off her student loans, for everything. Vincent's words seemed to come from far away. My husband, my dear Edward, had been working secretly, saving every extra penny so we could have a comfortable retirement together. And Claire had stolen that dream. How do you know all this? My voice was barely a whisper. I found the documents in her office when I was 12. I didn't understand what they meant then, but when I got older and started asking questions, she told me it was better you didn't know, that it would hurt you more to know Dad had kept secrets. And you believed her? Vincent hung his head in shame. She was my mom, Grandma, and I was just a kid. But now, after what she did to you with the wedding, I can't stay quiet anymore. I stood up from the sofa, shaking. It wasn't just about the betrayal of the money, though that was devastating. It was the realization that Claire had been manipulating me for years, making decisions about my life without my knowledge, controlling information that was rightfully mine. Is there anything else, Vincent? I asked, though I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. Yes, he whispered. There's also something about Uncle Robert's account. What about it? Mom had me sign some papers last year. She said they were for taxes, but I think she named me as the beneficiary of that account too, not just the money you're leaving me. What? Grandma, I think Mom was planning to have you sign documents to transfer Uncle Robert's money into my name with her as the administrator until I turned 21. The room fell completely silent. The sheer scale of Claire's betrayal was larger than I had ever imagined. She hadn't just shut me out of her wedding and insulted me cruelly. She had been orchestrating a scheme to control all of my money. Vincent, I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. Do you have those documents? Yes, I brought them with me. He pulled a folder from his backpack. I thought you should see them. I went through the papers with trembling hands. It was all there. Trust transfer forms, financial guardianship documents, even a draft of a new will that named me as incapacitated to handle complex financial matters due to advanced age. Incapacitated? I read aloud. I'm 62, not 92. Grandma, Vincent touched my hand gently. There's something else you need to know. What else could there be? Mom has been telling everyone that you're starting to have memory problems. The family, the neighbors. She even went to talk to your doctor. What? The fury I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. She went to talk to Dr. Evans? Yes, she told him you were showing signs of confusion, that you sometimes forgot important things. She was building a case to prove you weren't competent to manage your own money. I sat down heavily. The full picture of Claire's vision slammed into me like a tidal wave. It hadn't just been about the wedding. It had been a carefully orchestrated plan to isolate me, control my finances, and eventually take over all my assets. Why are you telling me all this now, Vincent? Because after seeing you suffer so much over the wedding, I couldn't be a part of her lies anymore. And because... He paused, struggling with the words. Because what? Because she told me that after she got control of your money, we'd probably have to put you in a nursing home. She said it would be what's best for you, but I knew it was really because she wouldn't need you anymore. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. Not tears of sadness this time, but of pure, righteous rage. My own daughter had been planning to rob me of my independence, my home, my dignity, all for money. Vincent, I said, wiping my eyes, would you be willing to testify about all of this if it came to it? Testify to a lawyer or even a judge? Vincent nodded firmly. Yes, Grandma. It's time for Mom to pay for what she's been doing. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I grew up, where I built a life with Edward, where I raised a daughter who now saw me as nothing more than a source of cash to be exploited. Vincent, I said without turning around, Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? What, Grandma? That if Claire had just come to me honestly, if she had told me she needed financial help or wanted part of her inheritance early, I probably would have given it to her, because I loved her. And now, I turned to face him, and for the first time in days, I smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who finally understood exactly who she was dealing with. Now, Vincent, your mother is about to find out that two can play this game of manipulation, and I have many more years of experience. It was time to make some phone calls. Claire wasn't the only one who could make a plan. On Monday morning, exactly 2 weeks after discovering I had missed my own daughter's wedding, I was sitting in the office of the most prestigious lawyer in Boston. Margaret Sullivan had a fierce reputation in cases of financial fraud and elder abuse. Her office on the 32nd floor of a financial district skyscraper screamed success and competence. Mrs. Miller, Attorney Sullivan said, reviewing the documents Vincent and I had brought, this is one of the most calculated cases of familial financial abuse I've seen in my 25-year career. Vincent sat beside me, nervous but determined. He had insisted on coming, saying it was time someone stood up for his grandmother. How serious is the situation legally? I asked. Very serious. Your daughter committed fraud when she appropriated the $400,000 from your husband's investment account. That's theft, pure and simple. Furthermore, the attempts to manipulate your medical reputation to have you declared incompetent constitute elder abuse under Massachusetts law. And what can we do about it? Attorney Sullivan smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We can do a lot of things. First, we're going to press criminal charges for fraud. Second, we're going to sue her civilly for the $400,000 plus compound interest over the last 7 years. That would be approximately $600,000 now. Vincent let out a low whistle. Could Mom go to jail? Fraud of this magnitude typically carries a sentence of 2 to 5 years in prison, the lawyer replied, especially when there's evidence of premeditation and psychological manipulation. I want you to know, I said carefully, I'm not doing this for revenge. You're not? Attorney Sullivan raised an eyebrow. No, I'm doing it because my daughter needs to learn that actions have consequences, and because I can't let her continue to manipulate and hurt people. What do you mean? Vincent cleared his throat. Grandma, there's something else I haven't told you. My stomach sank. What now? Mom has also been manipulating Michael's family, her new husband. She's been telling them stories about you, painting you as a toxic, abusive mother who ruined her childhood. What? The word came out as a choked cry. She told them you were an alcoholic, that you beat her, that you forced her to work from the age of 14 to support the house. She basically invented a whole history of abuse to explain why you didn't want to be in her life. Attorney Sullivan put down her pen. Do you have any evidence of this slander? Vincent took out his phone. I recorded a conversation she had with Mrs. Thornton, Mom's mother-in-law, last week. He played the recording. Claire's voice filled the office. My mother was terrible to me as a child. She would hit me with whatever was handy when I didn't clean the house perfectly. And the drinking. Margaret, you can't imagine what it was like living with an alcoholic. I had to hide money for food because she'd spend it all on vodka. I gasped. Every word was a lie, a cruel fabrication designed to justify her behavior and win sympathy. The recording continued. That's why I couldn't invite her to the wedding. You know how alcoholics are, always causing a scene, ruining special moments. Michael and I decided it was better to keep her away. My God, I whispered. Did Mrs. Thornton believe her? Completely, Vincent answered. And not only that, Mom convinced Michael to lend her $50,000 for therapy to deal with the trauma of her abusive childhood. Attorney Sullivan took notes rapidly. That's defamation with financial damages. We're looking at additional charges. $50,000? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She used it to redecorate the house and buy herself a new car, Vincent explained. A pink BMW convertible. She said she deserved it after all her years of trauma. Vincent, said Attorney Sullivan, would you be willing to testify against your mother in court? Vincent looked at me, his eyes full of determination and sadness. Yes, I can't keep letting her hurt my grandmother or lie about her. Good. Now, Mrs. Miller, there's something else we should discuss. With the evidence we have, we could force your daughter to return not only the original $400,000, but also seek punitive damages. What does that mean? It means we could sue her for double or even triple the stolen amount. We're talking about potentially $1.2 million. But she doesn't have that kind of money, I protested. No, but her new husband does. And under Massachusetts marital property laws, he could be held liable for her debts. Vincent sat up straighter. Does that mean Michael could lose his money because of Mom's lies? Exactly. And when he finds out his new wife is not only a thief, but also used him to get money under false pretenses. The lawyer left the sentence unfinished, but the implications were clear. Her marriage wouldn't survive that, I murmured. Probably not, especially when the Thornton family finds out that all the stories about you were invented. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing all the information. Claire hadn't just stolen money and shut me out of her life. She had built an entire web of lies and manipulation that extended to her new family. Mrs. Sullivan, I said finally, I want you to proceed with everything. The criminal charges, the civil suit, all of it. Are you sure? This will destroy your daughter's life. My daughter destroyed my life first. And more importantly, she's destroying other people's lives with her lies. The Thornton family deserves to know the truth about who their son married. Very well. We'll begin the proceedings tomorrow. As we left the office, Vincent took my arm. Grandma, are you sure about this? Once this starts, there's no going back. Vincent, I said, looking him straight in the eye, your mother had many chances to do the right thing. She could have come to me honestly. She could have apologized after the wedding. She could have stopped the lies at any point, but instead, she doubled down and kept lying and stealing. I know, it's just, she's my mom, you know, and I'm your grandmother, and I deserve justice. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Not because I was happy to hurt Claire, but because I was finally taking control of my own life. I was no longer the silent victim of my daughter's manipulations. The next day, Attorney Sullivan called me early. Mrs. Miller, I have some interesting news. I spoke with Michael Thornton last night. You told him everything already? I told him enough. He wants to meet with you. With me? Why? Apparently, some things your daughter had told him never quite added up. Her stories about you didn't match the woman Vincent described when he talked about his grandmother. Michael wants to hear your side of the story. And what about Claire? He hasn't told her anything yet, but I think his marriage is about to face its first real crisis. I hung up the phone with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it wasn't sadness either. It was something more like relief. Finally, the truth was going to come out. 6 months after the meeting in Attorney Sullivan's office, I was sitting in my new little apartment, drinking coffee and reading the morning paper. I no longer lived in the house where I had raised Claire. I had sold it and moved to a smaller, quieter place in a neighborhood where no one knew my story and where I could start over. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. It was Vincent, just like every Saturday for the past few months, but this time he brought news. Grandma, he said, sitting on the sofa with an expression that mixed relief and sadness. Mom's divorce papers were finalized yesterday. How is she? Not great. Michael got the house, of course. It was his before the marriage, and she had to pay back the $50,000 she'd borrowed for her supposed therapy. And your grandfather's money? The judge ordered her to repay the full $400,000 plus interest, in total $630,000. Vincent paused. She had to sell her BMW and pawn almost all of her jewelry to get the money. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing this, but I didn't feel guilt either. Claire had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Where is she living now? In a small apartment on the other side of town. She's working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. Vincent looked at me carefully. She asks about you all the time. And what do you tell her? I tell her the truth, that you're doing well, that you're at peace, and that you don't want any contact with her. I nodded. It was the truth. After everything that had happened, I had no desire for reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. You know what's the strangest thing, Vincent? I said, getting up to pour him more coffee. What? That I feel happier now than I have in years. Before, I was always worried about Claire, always trying to understand why she treated me so coldly, always wondering what I'd done wrong as a mother. Now I know I didn't do anything wrong. I just raised someone who chose to be cruel. Vincent nodded. And you know what the best part of all this is? What? That now I have a grandma who's actually happy. Before, you always seemed sad when Mom wasn't being nice to you. Now you're different, stronger. He was right. The last few months had been a revelation. Without the constant pressure of trying to earn Claire's love, I had rediscovered who I really was. I had started taking painting classes at the community center. I had made new friends. I had even started going out occasionally with Harold, a sweet widower I met at the library. You know what I did yesterday? I asked Vincent. What? I went to visit your grandfather's grave for the first time since I found out about the stolen money. How did that feel? I told him everything. I told him I had recovered the money he'd saved for us and that it's in an account for you now. I told him I had found peace. I paused, remembering the sense of calm I had felt at the cemetery, and I asked for his forgiveness. Forgiveness for what? For raising a daughter who dishonored him by stealing his final gift to me. Vincent got up and hugged me. Grandma, you're not to blame for Mom's choices. I know, but I needed to tell him. We stood in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Vincent spoke again. You know what Mom told me the last time I talked to her? What? She said she understands now why you cut her out of the will. She said if it were her, she probably would have done the same thing. Really? Yeah, I think she's finally realizing what she lost. Not just the money, but us, her real family. And how do you feel about that? Vincent sighed. Sad for her, but not guilty. She chose her path, and I chose mine. I chose to stay with you, and I am so grateful for that. That afternoon, after Vincent left, I sat on my small but sunny balcony, looking out over the park where children played and families had picnics. It was a simple view, but it filled me with a peace I hadn't felt in years. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Miller? This is Michael Thornton. I sat up straighter in my chair. I hadn't spoken to him since our meeting in the lawyer's office months ago. Hello, Michael. How are you? I'm well, thank you. I was calling because I wanted you to know that Claire finally told me the truth about everything. She did? About the wedding? About her father's money? About the lies she told me about you? Everything. And how do you feel about that? Furious? Betrayed? but also relieved to be out of that relationship. He paused. Mrs. Miller, I want you to know that I deeply regret believing those stories about you. I should have gotten to know the woman who raised Vincent before I made any judgments. Michael, you had no way of knowing she was lying. Maybe not, but I apologize nonetheless. And I want you to know something else. What's that? Claire is seeing a therapist now. I think she's finally starting to understand the damage she caused. I'm not saying it erases what she did, but I thought you might want to know that she's trying to change. I'm glad to hear that. I hope she finds peace with herself. And you? Have you found peace? I looked around my little apartment, filled with new plants and books I finally had time to read, with pictures of Vincent and me smiling without a single image of Claire. Yes, I said with complete honesty. I think I have. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. There was no victory in what had happened. There was no sense of revenge fulfilled. There was only a deep, overwhelming sense of freedom. For the first time in decades, my life belonged completely to me. It wasn't defined by Claire's expectations or manipulations. It wasn't consumed by the need to earn her love or approval. It was simply mine. That night, before I went to sleep, I took out a photo I had kept on my bedside table. It was of Claire when she was 5 years old, smiling as we built a sandcastle on the beach. For a long time, I had kept that photo, hoping that one day we would have moments like that again. But now I understood that the little girl in the picture had grown up and chosen to become someone else. And I had chosen not to let that person continue to hurt me. I put the photo away in a box in the closet. I didn't throw it out, because those memories had been real once, but I wouldn't keep it where I could see it every day either. Some chapters in life simply have to close so that new ones can begin. And I was ready for my new chapter.